Thank you, Pete. Over to you.
Yes, let me just read a few verses from Hebrews chapter 11. So do look it up there if you want to, or just listen, whichever you prefer. The beginning of Hebrews chapter 11, and we're only going to read the first 7 verses. It's a familiar chapter to many, many Christian people, a favorite chapter for many believers. And it's a colossal chapter in terms of what it contains by way of this remarkable sweep through the Old Testament, picking out people of faith from the scriptures. But we're just going to focus on the first 7 verses. So let me read those. The writer says, "Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings, and by faith, he still speaks, even though he's dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away, for before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith." Well, as you know, chapter 11 goes on to speak of Abraham and Moses and Joseph and so on, and all the other terrific believers of the Old Testament scriptures. And I suspect that those few verses at the beginning of the chapter are actually among the verses that are less well known than some of the verses that come later on, although the whole theme of the chapter is the same. But verses 4 to 7 are a beautiful, tightly packed window into the message of the chapter. The writer says this is what the ancients were commended for. And by the ancients, he means those who came before the flood. From Abraham onwards, things are very different for a start. Human beings didn't live as long and so on. There was a different era, if you like. And when the writer speaks about the ancients, he's speaking about Adam and Eve through to Noah, that period in Genesis, which was almost way back near the dawn of time. And the writer takes us to Abel, to Enoch, and to Noah, just as 3 examples of how to live by faith. And the examples he picks are very, very carefully picked, and they indicate what the writer is wanting us to learn from the chapter as a whole. With Abel is mentioned because he gave a better sacrifice at the beginning of his walk of faith. And Abel is mentioned precisely because it was something at the beginning that was really important. Abel gave a sacrifice which pleased God, and the writer says he goes on speaking for the rest of his life and even beyond, even though he's dead. He goes on proclaiming to the world don't look back. Sacrifice to God by faith and keep going. So that's beginnings. Abel is mentioned because of the beginnings of his walk of faith. Enoch is mentioned because of his continuing in a walk of faith. Enoch, as we all know, was one of these rare examples who simply never experienced mortal death, physical death. He just walked with God and walked off into glory, as it were, into the new creation. The Lord just took him and he didn't taste death. He just continued in fellowship with God right into the new creation. The writer says he didn't experience death. He couldn't be found because God had taken him away. He pleased God. And Enoch has this message of just continuing on with God. So with Abel, we've got beginnings. With Enoch, we've got continuing to walk with God. And then with Noah, the third example, we've got endings. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. All the work of his faith was about something that was going to come at the end of the story, the flood. Everyone round about him, scorned him as being ridiculous. Where is this flood? What are you doing, Noah? Building an ark in the middle of the desert. You can just imagine the mockery, can't you, as the culture at large, which had abandoned all belief in God, walked past every day as he got the next batch of wood and hammers and nails and carried on, driven by holy fear, building his ark. But it ended well for Noah, didn't it? And he was right. He stood on what God had said and believed it absolutely to be true with all his heart. See how the writer has structured that little passage? Begin with sacrifice to God, continue to walk with God, and your days will end well. You will be saved through the judgment because you've believed what God says to be true. Beginning, continuing, and ending. And the writer constructs that little introduction to his chapter just to say that to us. Whatever stage you're at, beginning, continuing, or near the end, your faith in God's word, what God has promised to be true, will never disappoint. That's really the essence of the chapter, isn't it? Whether it's Abraham believing that a better country is to come, or whether it's a better resurrection in a way further on in the chapter. Others were tortured and refused to be released so that they might gain a better resurrection, or whether it's the better country at the end of our life. We're looking ahead as Christians all the time, standing sometimes just on the bare promise of God. Whatever anyone says, whatever culture says, whatever circumstances indicate, we believe that what God has said is true, and we just look in that direction and we keep going by faith. That's what the chapter says. And at the beginning, he very cleverly says, whether you're at the beginning, in the middle, or near the end, this is what you need to hear. It's a very clever sermon, Hebrews 11. Go and enjoy the rest of it sometime. But that's a brilliant introduction. And what I want us to know tonight, we look back in the UCCF video to people who began the work of UCCF way back, when it was just Cambridge and Oxford and the vision of a handful of men. And then through time and through believing the gospel and having a vision for reaching the student world, the work has continued and does continue with hundreds and hundreds of students today making Christ known on the campus. And you folks in churches like Perth Baptist Church, praying, supporting, encouraging your young folks like Sarah and Robbie and others to become part of the Christian Union when they go to university. You have a massive, massive role, a significant role to play in the work of the gospel as students bravely and courageously make Jesus known on their campus. That's not a popular thing to do. When Sarah says she was helping students explain their faith to others, that takes guts today, more so than when I was at university. And maybe when some of you were at university, there was still a respect for the Christian message. It's pretty gutsy work to be a witness to the student world. And your prayers for those students are very, very much appreciated as they go out believing that what God has said is true, just like Hebrews 11 says. There was a message, apparently, I'm not on Twitter, but my minister told me that there was a message on Twitter by the president of the UK Humanist Society posted on Good Friday that apparently went viral. And the president of the UK Humanist Society saw fit to say on Good Friday on their Twitter feed, just a reminder for those who need it, dead people don't rise again. What a smug thing to put up. Part of me thought, why the need? Who are you trying to convince? But we encourage students out into an unbelieving world to make their faith in Jesus known. And these students believe the promises of God and trust him to build his kingdom as they witness to Jesus. So thank you for your prayers, for your support. Whether, like Sarah, you're near the beginning, whether like some of us, we're all continuing, or whether like some saints known to us, we're near the end. And none of us knows when that is, do we? Believe God's word, believe his promises. That's all he asks us to do.